So, not too long ago, I decided to read the works of Robert E. Howard for the first time. Him and other popular old school fantasy authors, such as Fritz Leiber and C.L. Moore, Michael Moorcock, but more on that later. From my father's library, I found this book here, The Essential Conan, which we figured would be a good place to start. Uh, I fully intend to read the rest of Howard's works, at least his Conan stories, and maybe some Solomon Kane as well. But for now, I'd like to say I have a pretty good idea of Howard's writing and at least a decent enough understanding of his most famous character. Conan is, I found, far from the admittedly kind of awesome brute depicted by Arnold Schwarzenegger in the 80s, right? Conan in the stories is this grizzled, mean, very clever guy who, depending on the time in which we find him, because we're shown pretty much the whole of Conan's life, from the time he's a teenager to a 20-year-old sellsword to this guy in his 40s and 50s as a king, right? Uh, he winds up being, depending on the story, either this like heroic swashbuckling hero to a roguish, less than scrupulous rapscallion, to this like fearsome, unstoppable force of nature, right? He's got so many sides to him, this Conan, and sometimes he seems to be just so wise and intelligent, and other times a little less than that, depending on the circumstance. I am struck by how intelligent he turned out to be. Uh, Once he reaches his 30s and 40s, Conan is very thoughtful. He's very cautious, very tactful. He knows he's not a kid anymore, and this Conan is the sort that we see in Beyond the Black River and A Witch Shall Be Born. He waits and plans. He thinks things through. He is patient with his vengeance, and he is dead set upon his goals, which he's somewhat crass at times, somewhat. Uh, he's not really interested in what people think of him, is Conan. And I think that's the closest thing we're going to get to a weakness in Conan. He is extremely physically capable, but he's he knows he's physically capable. He knows he is this brilliant swordsman and fighter, and he can take almost anyone in a fight. And to a certain extent, he is rightly sure of himself. But he thinks that means he can say he thinks that means he can say whatever he wants to whoever he wants at any given time. Uh, Even I've found the lustful, roguish Conan to be a bit much at times, but I think he's a fine character still, and I think he's still a good character. Almost for those reasons, for that weakness, that while he is very wise and thoughtful, he sort of enjoys making problems for himself to a certain extent. Uh, I don't think I'd have a particularly pleasant conversation with the man himself, most notably because I do not drink and I am not a 6 to 7 foot tall warrior. You know, brothels and bar fights aren't exactly my thing. And he'd probably think I'm some small, weak little worm. And you know, compared to him, that wouldn't be a bad assessment. Conan grew up in the cold and bitter climes of Cimmeria. He grew up like the wildlings in A Song of Ice and Fire, right? With this take what you want culture and the smash the face of people you don't like. Uh, and that's another fascinating thing for Conan. is he expects everyone to be like a Cimmerian, right? Uh, he has this interest in fair play, in fighting with honor, and being dutiful and bold. And when people use magic and lie and are deceitful, it enrages him. Uh, and sadly, there's a lot of magic and a lot of treachery in Robert E. Howard's Hyborian Age. So I do profoundly love Howard's writing. He has this great poetic style, which works surprisingly well with this gritty, grim world he's created. There are wondrous things out there, wonders and terrors beyond imagining. But Howard's interest is primarily in the suggestion of these things, because the story is still about Conan. So he uses this cultural shorthand, I like to call it at least, and I think he uses it rather well, where he gives you the name of a country and some names for the people who live there, and you're supposed to get a general idea for the culture that this country is based on. Aquilonia, for instance, is a brilliant analog for medieval France. Sort of. Some of the people have more Roman-ish names. It's a little weird. And then you have like Argos, which is like Greece. And okay, yeah, some of them are a bit on the nose, right? Like Asgard for the Vikings and Zimbabwe. Yeah, there's just a place called Zimbabwe, which, okay, it's fine, I guess, because it is supposed to be this prehistorical version of our world. Between the time the oceans drank Atlantis and the rise of the sons of Ares, right? Uh, but still, I would have preferred a bit more creativity on Zimbabwe. But I mean, how many American people in the 1930s are even going to know about Zimbabwe? He could kind of get away with it, I guess. Uh, anyway, uh, it is nevertheless a fascinating world to explore, full of these cannibals and monsters and wizards galore. There's a horrific cult for everyone you can imagine. There's snake cults for the Egypt analog, sort of horned god, Kernanos type stuff going on with the Picts. Uh, there's an evil wizard in the novel he writes, Hour of the Dragon, and this guy, he's a lich. He's a full blown high magic Dungeons and Dragons style lich who takes over Conan's kingdom of Aquilonia and starts wrecking shop with thunderstorms and avalanches. He can teleport and he rides in a chariot pulled by nightmare horses. It's pretty wild. But Hour of the Dragon in itself is only okay in my opinion. It's not my cup of tea personally. But nevertheless, what I deem as average Robert E. Howard is still better than most other fantasy. I'd be willing to say, just for the language alone. He's so good at descriptions, sometimes so good I'm left reeling in many ways. Uh, but what I deem to be his best work, at least as far as what I've read in the Essential Conan, is A Witch Shall Be Born, uh, in which we see all sorts of crazy characters. Conan gets only like one or two parts all to himself. The rest is told through letters and the point of view of conspirators to the captured queen, to this like valiant soldier who's actually the guy who kills the villain at the end. Yeah, Conan doesn't even kill the main villain of the story. He just rocks up with an army and provides a distraction while my man Valerius the soldier, who we'll never meet again, uh, swoops in to save the day. It's a really weird, fun story that it stands out in my mind so much. Uh, so basically, This girl was born with a crescent birthmark that supposedly means that she is going to grow up to be a witch. So her parents leave her out in the desert to die, but she's found by an actual magician who teaches her magic and raises her to be evil and plot to retake her throne, right? To steal the throne from her sister. Uh, so it's a self fulfilling prophecy, which I love those. Give me a self fulfilling prophecy any day. I'll eat it. I'll eat it up. But the witch falls in line with this nasty mercenary captain who leads the takeover of the city, right? And they kill a bunch of people, disband the army. They do a full coup. While the witch pretends to be her sister, she kidnaps her sister, who is currently ruling, and then takes her place, right? Because they're twins. So she pretends to be her sister and orders all these crazy, makes all these crazy decisions. Conan, who happens to be captain of the guards at the time, doesn't buy any of that, right? He doesn't buy the queen's sudden strange change of heart, and he fights back. So the mercenaries swarm him. He's fighting 100 guys at once, and so he puts his back up against a wall and lays waste to everyone around him. Uh, while they do manage to overwhelm him in the end, supposedly the bodies just get stacked so high that it's almost impossible for anyone to fight anymore. Uh, yeah, Conan's pretty tough. I don't know if you noticed that about him. Uh, when he gets captured and he gets crucified by the Witch Queen's soldiers, only to be saved by a bunch of desert raiders, who he then joins and then subverts in order to retake the kingdom. Uh, he does let the captain of the desert raiders live because he saved his life, but the guy is, a desert raider, right? He like murders people and is generally unpleasant. So he kind of deserves to be usurped, but still, Conan just completely pulls a switcheroo on that guy. Uno reverse card. Uh, but Conan lures the mercenaries who the Witch Queen has. He lures them out of the city and defeats them in battle, using some clever tactics and calling in some old favors. Uh, yeah, he's a clever guy. And then out of nowhere, in the city, this young soldier Valerius learns that the real queen is still alive and is in the dungeon somewhere. So he goes to rescue her, and he does rescue her, and he kills the witch. He kills the witch, which is neat. Conan doesn't get to be there for every awesome thing that happens in the Hyborian Age, so it feels realistic that way. But Conan does show up in the end for when, crawling from the witch's temple, this demon creature appears and starts looking for stuff to eat. Uh, Conan, the smart, intelligent fighter that he is, does not wrestle with the demon or like punch it in the face, do anything so foolish. He rides up with a whole bunch of archers, highly trained, specialized archers, and he peppers the thing to death with a bunch of arrows. Bippity boppity boo. Suck it, you demon. Uh, so yeah, that's my favorite story I've read so far. I'd say it's pretty good. Weird, but the story itself, or the events that happen, and the premise is just so cool. I enjoy it. And I like that some punk kid showed up at the last minute to kill the witch. That's just something that's very funny to me. I like that Conan spent the entire time as an intelligent military leader, right? He's sitting back and luring the enemy into a trap, and we get to see this very fascinating side of Conan, this this brilliant tactician. Yeah, uh, what shall be born? It's not bad. Uh, and neither is Howard's writing in general. I was certainly impressed, and I'm interested in reading more. I know Michael K. Vaughan, another booktuber, is encouraging people to read Conan in September, and I'm certainly not opposed to that. I'd like to read The Tower of the Elephant and Phoenix on the Sword, especially. I've heard a lot about those two, and uh, I know one happens to feature Conan at his youngest point and Conan at his oldest point, respectively. Yeah, that's that. Robert E. Howard. Pretty good. Bye.